Good evening and welcome to Crossroads. Now look, you'd think of all people, Donald Trump would be the most affected by all the attacks he's currently facing. He's been indicted 4 times, maybe more. He's looking at a combined total, as of now, of around 700 years in prison. Former Fox News host Tucker Carlson is suggesting that the legal attacks don't work on Trump. Well, the establishment might even make an attempt on his life. Watch.
Are they going to let Trump be president?
No, of course. I mean, look, if, they protested him, they called him names. He won anyway. They impeached him twice on ridiculous pretenses. They fabricated a lot about what happened on January 6th in order to impeach him again. It didn't work. He came back. Then they indicted him. It didn't work. He became more popular. Then they indicted him 3 more times, and every single time his popularity rose. So if you begin with criticism, then you go to protest, then you go to impeachment, now you go to indictment, and none of them work, what's next? I mean, graph it out, man. We're speeding toward assassination, obviously, and no one will say that, but I don't know how you can reach that conclusion.
So how does Trump feel about all this? Well, look, Trump doesn't seem to be moved. When he was asked about this in a recent interview with Tucker Carlson, he pointed to his poll numbers. Trump appears to see hope in public support, and this isn't just because voters are sticking by him. For Trump, the public support is a sign that people are smart enough to discern fact from fiction. They see through the legal attacks, and they look at it the same way as Trump does, notably as tools to sway the 2024 elections. And look, it's not working. Instead, the attacks have been helping Trump in the polls. If you remember, this is what Trump said just recently.
I have never seen spirit like there is right now. Even coming down here, just the people on the road that are just absolutely going crazy. And the reason is, I think they like me, and I know they love my policies. I hope they like me too. A lot of people say they don't like me, but they like my policies. I think they like me. But I have never seen spirit like it is right now. And the reason is because crooked Joe Biden is so bad. He's the worst president in the history of our country.
Look, polling or not, and regardless of how the public feels about it all, the gravity of what Trump is facing does look pretty serious. Many of his supporters have been voicing this. Even if they support him, even if they believe he can win, there are doubts among his base on whether Trump is able to stand up against all these attacks against him. But last night, Trump responded to these concerns, and his message was simple. Do not despair and do not lose hope. Watch.
Under crooked Joe Biden, our country is going through some very difficult times. The rule of law is being destroyed, and the justice system is being wielded as a weapon against Joe Biden's political opponents, me primarily. Over the past few months, I've heard from countless Americans who are deeply disturbed by these appalling political persecutions and attacks. I want to say to you today, do not despair and do not lose hope. Every injustice they throw at us, every hoax, witch hunt, and abuse of power must only harden our will and steel to resolve to save our nation. This is the nation we love. We will save it. We will not let this happen.
Now, in that statement, what Trump is doing is he's framing a meta-narrative. Americans right now are witnessing a type of shock and awe campaign. It's the lawlessness in the streets, rampant retail crime, car thefts, homelessness. The borders are literally being flung wide open. America feels less safe, it feels less secure. Homes are becoming less affordable. Inflation is squeezing the value of the dollar. They're taxing us on every part they can. And then look, there's the constant pressure of government expansion and notably as well, the weaponization of law. The treatment of the J6 protesters, bizarre globalist agendas, the sexualizing of our children in schools. America does not seem like the same country as before. But the challenge with shock and awe campaigns is that people sometimes just shut down. They lose hope in the country. They question whether voting even matters. I've heard it, They feel things are so bad that they start wanting to see the whole system essentially change. And because of that, they become willing to accept new forms of social control and notably new tools for so-called social stability that they would normally otherwise never tolerate. But this is the game. It's what used to be called demoralization. In fact, it's an old communist strategy that was actually aggressively used by the Soviets and others against the United States. It happens when the people of a nation lose hope. And it's this hopelessness itself, notably, that Trump is calling out. He's encouraging his supporters to look at the big picture, to focus on the long game. Watch.
We'll be back. We are not taking any chances. We're way up in the polls in Iowa and all over the country. We're up by over 50 points. That's a lot, but we don't want to take any chances. We'll be back. We love you very much, and just take care of yourself. Stay healthy. Stay healthy. And stay strong.
And look, notably, the big picture here, pay attention to what's really taking place. If you take Trump's narrative as the truth, if you believe his narrative of what we're watching, it suggests that the establishment is worried that he might win. I mean, why else would they seemingly throw everything they have at him? Why else would they exhaust their legal options? And maybe even some, not so legal options at this point, but hey, that's a whole other issue. The reality is the attacks do not seem to be working, and you can see that whether you agree with them or not. What's not being discussed as much as well is what Trump is now promising if he does come back into office. And in fact, this ties to what conservatives are now calling Project 2025. Now, Project 2025, also called the 2025 Presidential Transition Project, is being organized by the Heritage Foundation, notably a conservative think tank. It notes that it's based on the organization's mandate for leadership, which the Trump administration used heavily for policy guidance. And if you were going to the project's website, you'd be greeted with what looks like a fairly sanitized picture. It has a picture of the White House. Below it is a bolded sentence, quote, "Building now for a conservative victory through policy, personnel, and training." Well, sounds like a well-intended snore fest, but if you read a bit further, what you'll see is this. It's presenting a framework to, quote, "rescue the country from the grip of the radical left." It proposes that what's needed is not just an agenda on how to govern the country. It suggests that this needs an agenda to get the right people in place. And it says things are currently in place as we speak to enact this agenda, quote, "on day one of the next conservative administration." So you might be asking, what's this agenda? Well, this is where that sanitized and rather boring policy proposal starts to get pretty interesting. Let's just have a look at what the establishment media has to say about it. Here's New York Times. Donald J. Trump and his allies are planning a sweeping expansion of presidential power over the machinery of government if voters return him to the White House in 2025, reshaping the structure of the executive branch to concentrate far greater authority directly in his hands. PBS, if you turn to them, it says this. A constellation of conservative organizations is preparing for a possible second White House term for Donald Trump, recruiting thousands of Americans to come to Washington on a mission to dismantle the federal government and replace it with a vision closer to his own. If you turn to Los Angeles Times, they explain it like this. They say conservative groups draw up plan to dismantle the U.S. government and replace it with Trump's vision. Interesting. So they're planning to dismantle the U.S. government and they want to create the government again in Trump's image. Well, look, it frames Project 2025 as a, quote, far-reaching effort that is essentially a government in waiting for the former president's return. Well, everyone, that's all for today for YouTube. For the rest of the episode, come join us on Epoch TV. There's a lot of news we can't talk about on YouTube. You might have noticed we didn't publish one of our recent episodes on YouTube at all. It's because we were talking about things that you can't even say on YouTube. For our episodes that we cannot air here, for the segments we cannot air here, again, join us on Epoch TV. It's our own video platform. We have no censorship there. We're able to talk about any major news story regardless of what the policies are. And even in fact, Twitter, X, they're censoring us in some ways. In fact, they actually recently censored us on a documentary we did. And so there's a lot of news you cannot see on YouTube. There's a lot of news you won't even know exists unless you get out of the big tech, system and come over to a private platform. Epoch TV, we have a lot of great content, documentaries, movies, the rest of my show, and important stuff, especially as we go into the elections. For the rest of this episode, we'll be talking about Chinese Communist Party involvement in our elections, which I definitely can't talk about on YouTube. We'll also be talking to Curtis Sliwa in New York about him being arrested for protesting mass migration, why it's happening, and also notably the civil disobedience campaigns currently being organized in New York to begin taking a stand against it. Lots going to be going on, and again, for the rest of the episode, join us on Epoch TV. We'll be talking about all of this. Again, flash sale going on right now at 25 cents. Come join us. Link in the description. I'll see you there.
People from 160 countries illegally cross the U.S.-Mexico border and give themselves up to Border Patrol. But what about the ones who evade Border Patrol? These are known as the gotaways.
You can safely assume that anybody that went through the extra effort to avoid U.S. Border Patrol was not an asylum seeker by default.
It may not be today, it may not be tomorrow, but somewhere down the road, if somebody rapes and kills somebody, and we find out that they came through here on my watch, that's unacceptable.
These men had surrounded my house. They were banging on my back door. They were banging on my front door.
You can't understand it unless you're out here seeing it every day. 21 dead bodies on the property.
Code 3 response.
Is it wrong to ask people to come to your front door of your home? Then why would it be wrong to ask people to come to the front door of our nation?
Their primary goal is to circumvent the checkpoints, go undetected.
People that do not want to surrender, those are going to be the potential terrorists, the criminals, the real threat to the U.S.
We were hoping the federal government would step in and do something, but they didn't.
We have no clue who they are or where they're going. That's the scary part.